Well, hello everyone. I'm Nacho Mateo. I'm the CEO of South Summit, and I hope you all are enjoying the first day of our amazing South Summit Korea edition. So today we have a fantastic discussion panel. We are going to talk about scaling up, and especially the main challenges and opportunities that a founder needs to face while scaling up. As you already know, scaling up is one of the most crucial moments for any entrepreneur, especially because you need to deal with many operational changes, but at the same time, you need to look for new international markets and opportunities. No? So today we have here two rock stars of panelists. We have Stella. She is the principal of Orbit Startups. She has over a decade of experience in the venture capital and entrepreneurship world. She has been working in the US, in Latin America, in Asia, but I will let Stella to tell us a little bit about Orbit Startups and her background so you can understand better her expertise in the scaling up world.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much, Mateo and Nacho. Your name is two first names. Thank you so much, everybody, for having me here. Very excited to be president at South Summit's first Korea edition. So my name is Stella. As Nacho said, I'm a VC investor. Our fund is an early stage fund. We do have portfolio companies that have obviously, exited, become unicorns, and Series B plus. So happy to discuss about scaling up, but mostly our investment stage is pre-seed and seed. About $180,000 of early tickets, and then we do selective follow-ons. Myself, have had a very unusual path to venture capital. First started out my career as a fintech entrepreneur in New York City that used to do remittance. And then I actually joined a Mexican venture capital fund investing in both the US and Latin America, which we actually recently in 2021 had a $3 billion exit coming from Chile. So that was a very interesting experience. And then I went to the Latin American arm of the World Bank doing fund of funds investment and also Series A and B, more of a scale-up investment. And recently, since last year, I joined Orbit Startups, which is, again, an emerging markets focused early stage, seed and seed stage fund. We have about $75 million, almost $280 million deployed so far. We're closing our third fund very soon. Again, initial investment ticket size of $180,000. Geographically, we have quite a few areas that we invest in. So 50% Asia, 25% LATAM, 25% MENA and Africa. Very, very global company. So very much looking forward to, discussing the topic with Nacho. But if any one of you are founders in these regions, happy to discuss after the talk.
Thank you so much, Stella. You talk about emerging markets, and we will go deeper later. But first, let me introduce our other rockstar. It's Riso. He is the CEO of the Garrison. Riso has a lot of experience in helping startups to reallocate here in Korea, but at the same time, also helping founders to scale and to enter in other new markets. But Riso, I will do the microphone so you can give us an overview about your role and the Garrison.
All right, nice to meet you, everyone. Founder was my first job, so we started the Garrison 3 years before, but like 5 years before, that's when I first started my entrepreneurial journey. Our company's mission is solely about globalizing South Korean startup ecosystem. So just like these activities that we're having, like South Summit, it's all part of the national effort to globalize our startup ecosystem, not only to attract foreign talents and startups to Korea, but sending Korean startups to abroad. And our company's mission is pretty much the same. So we're running one of the biggest foreign entrepreneurs community, helping foreign startups to relocate in South Korea. Also, I've been running a couple of programs, taking Korean startups to Dubai, Tunisia, different African countries, but also to America, and etc. I'm also experienced a bit much in Senegal, and a bit of a random and rare ecosystem. So I would love to have a chat about how to scale abroad from any kind of country you're leaving from.
Fantastic, guys. So let's start talking a little bit about scaling up. The first question will be for both of you, okay? Let's think about a founder that has been successful in the early stage phase of their startup, let's say 2-3 years, growing in the local market, okay? And now it's time for that founder to start thinking about scaling up, okay? To start thinking about new markets. What will be the advice or the first challenge you guys think that these founders are going to face when they need to start this scaling up phase?
So I think, for our portfolio, scaling up doesn't always mean new markets. For some of you, I see some familiar faces. For some of you who were at my previous talk, we talked about how in our fund and seed stage company, our companies actually have multiple operating markets to begin with, even with your seed and seed and Series A stages. So I'm just going to assume that in this case, scale up is another level of revenue or another, not just going into a new market, right? They're not two different things. Some of the things that I think it's something that's not particularly very new, but it's very true when we see our portfolio companies, is that when you start growing the team, one of the biggest issues that we see is internal, actually. Because once you start growing the team, you're trying to hire senior profiles, because when you're an early stage company, you don't have a brand, you don't have the money, and you hire people who are generalists. Sometimes they're very young, or they don't have the most top tier schools or companies in the resume, but they bring the best attitude, right? And they grind for you. And once you go beyond that point, you need a more sophisticated sales team, more sophisticated marketing, dev, HR, and you want to start bringing in sort of these experience profiles. And a lot of those times, that pain, and a lot of the times CEO, if you're not a second, third time founder, you're also growing and learning. And that's I think number one growing pain that companies go through, mostly around Series B. So how to compensate the crew that started out with you. But a lot of the times, as a company grows, their generalist talent is not as useful as before. And then how to complement this new talent coming in, who are probably much more of an expert, but they don't have as much loyalty, and they could quit any minute because they're very, high demand talent. And how does the C-level, the CEO and the co-founders manage the incentive and grow the company in a culture that goes beyond the initial? So that is number one growing pain. And if you ask VC investors who invest early, that's probably going to be the top three growing challenges. That's not even about entering a new market, right? That's where a lot of our companies struggle, and we have to go in and try to help them along, in my opinion. So
Totally agree with you. Riso, any comment?
Yeah. In my case, I get to meet and interview a lot of scaling startups who are coming into Korea, often cases. And I think the strategies or the method behind scaling up, I think there's no such thing as a silver bullet to this. But everyone has a kind of similar approach in certain aspects, such as really reading the market. They really try to jump into the community, jump into the random people, and they're not afraid of talking and trying to learn about what this really ecosystem is about and what are the characters. And if I see a couple of success cases, one of them is Nacho Adnan, Loti Files, that has expanded to South Korea. They already had an indication that they have an increasing share of profit coming from Korea, so they eventually ended up expanding to Korea. And even though he had significant interest from the South Korean ecosystem about their products, what they first did was coming into Korea, jumping into events, talking with the potential customers, but also discussing with existing customers and really building their ties up together, and then successfully scaling in Korea. But also, I mean, Asia and like Korean people, basically we're pretty hot-tempered. We don't know how to wait. We're not really patient. And you know how Germans can be very straightforward. And I have a Korean German friend who is hot-tempered and very straightforward. And these guys, they expanded to Korea, and they were so successful. They really made their brand the South Korean ecosystem already. And what I seen was that he really spent enough time knowing about the people, knowing about the market, knowing about the reference and everything. And from that point, when he decided to land in Korea, everything went so fast. He decided who to hire, hired local, and hired locals who understands his background and his culture, and who knows how to communicate with the global partners that he had. And then that they just eventually landed in Korea pretty easily. So knowing the market in depth and knowing the people within that market in depth will be the first step to scale your business in abroad, yeah.
I totally agree with both of you, actually. Super, super valuable insights. So let's talk a little bit about emerging markets. Stella, you talk a little bit about that in the intro. If you're a founder and you are scaling up, of course you need to deal with the generic problems you can face scaling up. But I think that if you are focusing on emerging markets, you have other specific challenges ahead of that, no? Like, let's say, regulatory complexities or lack of infrastructure in the markets you're approaching, or even less maturity of the ecosystem where you're going, so you don't have that access to capital, for example. No? So what do you think are the challenges and also the opportunities for any founder that is focusing on emerging markets?
So, okay. Since we look at markets that are not typically considered the most lucrative, or there's a macro risk. For example, we went in India very early, like pre-2016. We have we have some of the top 3 largest companies or top growing companies in Pakistan in our portfolio. And you grab any investor, like, would you invest in Pakistan as a top market? Probably most of them would say no. And so, we invest in very risky markets because we do believe in the long-term potential of the macro variables of the emerging market. And I said that in another panel, but the MSCI Emerging Market Index over 20 years outperformed developed market and the rest of the world. So we truly believe in that. So aside from that, when we invest in founders that either are from emerging market or from developed ecosystem that do well, perform well in emerging markets, really their challenges generally is not market limitations. So I'm not saying that they're not challenging environments. It's just that that's the rule of the market. So if you are a very resilient, tenacious entrepreneur that won't get all these minor problems in the way, and you execute and you somehow make it work, that's just the basic criteria for a successful founder in the market. No one cares about your excuse about this regulation or whatnot. And I mean, it sounds very harsh, but nobody's gonna really be able to change that from one day to another. So does that mean you can't be an entrepreneur? That's not true. So the founders that we have invested in that were the most successful over time just did away with that environment and grew. So in fact, the scaling up challenges for these companies were able to even get to that growth level, right? So, it's probably more challenging for these environments to get to growth stage and maybe in developed markets. So assuming that you were already able to get to that level, I think it already speaks that you're tenacious enough to get over that most of these challenges. Now, at Series B plus levels, the challenges that we most see is availability of local capital. All right, we are a atypical VC fund that take especially higher risk in these markets. But when you get to Series B, you need bigger rounds, right? You need $10 million, $20 million, $30 million rounds. You need investors to write $5 million, $10 million checks, and those are funds that probably have $100 million, $200 million funds, and these guys are the bigger the fund, the less of a risk appetite they have, and so most of our companies in these markets, they really struggle when they get to Series B levels of raising capital. That's number one. And number two is really, I'm not even talking about operational. Operationally, a lot of these companies do great. We have companies in Pakistan that have grown like 3 digits like over pandemic, and they still struggle to raise capital. A, because of macro, and B, because what is your exit scenario? So I think for these markets, I don't even think it's the founders sometimes, the operationally, it's the macro they need to play against, which is why we really try for these founders to scale into other geographies, be it the US developed markets or another completely different geography to help kind of mitigate that risk.
Totally agree with you. Riso, any comment or?
South Korea is going to be one of the best guinea pig for the future generations to come because we have the fastest population decline in human history. And for that reason, we really have to push many startups to go abroad and also attract a lot of startups from abroad. And especially when we're trying to support these Korean startups, we're trying to expand abroad. Most common symptom that I get to see is that people only see the effect, not the cause. But you have to consider the cause first and then see the effect. When I say this, it's like everyone prefers to go to mature market like US or Europe, and I'll be asking them, why do you want to expand to US and European market? And they would just simply say, it's big, they give us better valuation, and we're going to go public in Nasdaq or in the IPO market in Europe. Because in South Korea, average founder, the duration of founder from starting to the IPO is usually 12 years. In America, it's usually 7 years, so it's going to be faster, and we can get better valuations. And I'll be asking them, have you really compared yourself with the publicly listed or successfully exited foreign startups in US stock market? And they don't really see the cause, how they got into that successful soft landing. So what is really important is that you have to find the right fit, right market where you can really be successful to expand in these kind of positions. Yeah.
Totally, Riso, totally agree. And let's talk about the other way around. Let's talk about the Korean market and the Korean ecosystem, okay? What will you recommend to any founder that wants to start operation here in Korea? Because I assume that it has a specific culture, a specific methodology, a specific operations. So what would you recommend, you guys, to any founder that wants to develop the market here in Korea?
So annually, South Korea is spending $2.7 billion to the startup ecosystem development. And I always put this analogy that the football club Tottenham Hotspur's valuation in 2023 was $3.1 billion. So for the last decade, annually, we've been purchasing Tottenham Hotspurs with about 30% discounts. And what I'm saying is that's how much money we have within the startup ecosystem development. And for the sake of our ecosystem, we're attracting a lot of foreign startups, which means we have loads and loads of programs coming that is like curated for foreign entrepreneurs who are already in Korea or coming into Korea. So leveraging the government program is definitely something that you could consider. Another thing is that South Korean culture is very weird, very difficult to understand in the Western perspective of views. Most common thing is when it comes to the B2B markets, because like B2C markets, South Korea is not that attractive because our market size is not that big. So usually startups should come in as a B2B startups. And when it comes to B2B, often they don't purchase your products because it's valuable. They purchase your product because they like you, or they purchase your product because you're close with them. So you really have to take time and understand those kind of aspects that in South Korea, the sales are different, building teams are different, and on top of everything, hire local. You have to hire local, yeah.
So if any founder wants to come to Korea, please get in touch with Riso. He can help you a lot in this sense. Perfect, guys. Stella, you mentioned earlier that emerging markets present unique opportunities, no? But I think that the best way for any founder is to learn from real cases. Can you share with us some successful cases of startups from your portfolio that have applied these strategies for the emerging markets?
Yeah, sure. So since we're talking about Korea, I mean, this is one Korean company that I always mention everywhere. We have a very successful webtoon content Korean company called HappyToon. We invested in them, I believe, 2019 or 18, so right before the pandemic. This was when the webtoon and webcomic industry was just getting popular in Korea. Nobody thought the global audience is going to consume this kind of stuff. And they basically pitched to us that we are going to be the #1 global distributor of this content. Believe me, in 3-4 years, everybody's going to want to read this kind of stuff everywhere. And the Korean VCs didn't buy it. They're like, this is a very Korean and Asian stuff. No one's going to want to consume it. K-pop is just a Korean thing. And we, really like the company. We have quite a diverse media and content portfolio, so we gave it a try. And fast forward, a few years, 5 years, the company is now raising its Series C. It was invested in a Series B, was invested by KB Investment, one of the biggest investors in Korea, and Naver, which is the leader in webtoon and webcomics. And now they are, one of the top 3 in U.S. distribution, as well as Europe, and Latin America as well. So in this particular case, we really help them connect through distributors in Southeast Asia as well. And speaking into emerging markets, we helped HappyToon create these global, especially sort of emerging markets where there's a lot of consumers, distribution, sort of marketing channels, so that they can distribute their content as much. Another example is actually an Indian company called Videoverse that started doing short form videos way before short form became the major thing. So they started building short form video pre-2018, 17, like really short form, like 4 seconds for short form video when people were still watching 2 minutes of YouTube videos. And so they really ate up the India market. And now they're working with the Philippines, Indonesia. They're working with gaming companies. They, recently, 3 years ago, expanded to the U.S. in LA, media entertainment industry, because we have a lot of contacts in the media industry in LA. We have an office in San Francisco. So we did help them scale up in terms of cross-border clients. So these are just 2 examples of companies that were able to go beyond sort of their local markets into the Series B, C stages in a way different and bigger markets as they started.
Fantastic, Stella. I mean, we only have 1.5 minutes. I will spend a whole hour talking with you guys, but I'm taking a lot of key takeaways. Scaling up is full of challenges, but full of opportunities. Emerging markets are a huge opportunity for the startups scaling up their businesses. A good strategy in operations is critical when scaling up, or take care of your company culture. That's an important advice as well. But just a closing question for both of you guys, taking in mind if you have any founder here, what piece of advice would you give to any founder that is thinking about growing and taking the risk of scaling up in the next stages?
So I think, like the Steve Jobs is the guru of our global startup ecosystem, and he says, stay foolish and stay hungry. And if you're a founder, staying hungry is one of the default value that you're going to have for the first couple of years. And stay foolish is something you have to have as a default value forever. And what I do is I always try to, whenever I go to a different ecosystem, I always try to spare time to understand the market, and not only the people who are in the startup games, but also the really random people from like bars, convenience stores, and really try to understand how these locals are thinking. One of the things that I did was pretty reckless, though. When I was building a startup ecosystem project in Senegal, every night I tried to arrange a meeting, and if I couldn't arrange a meeting with the local people, I would open up Tinder and just book a meeting that night and just meet them and ask them, like, what was your first job? What's your second job? Like, what's your average earning? Like, where are you spending? And what's your goal? What's your dream? Like, just interview the local market and ecosystem recklessly, stay foolish. I think that will be the scaling 101 wherever you're going.
Fantastic, Riso. Stella?
So on my end, I think generally entrepreneurs have this problem, but scale-ups especially, there is a whole inundation of advice. And so I try not to give more advice than is really needed. But I think really it all kind of boils down to keep solving problems, but solve the important ones. That's basically it. I think at your scale-up stage, you think at that point you will know what your priorities are, but generally you get even more lost. So, just my one piece of very general advice is that if you're scaling up, let's figure out what's the most important and let's just solve it.
Focus on the important ones, no? Fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed, guys, and I hope to see you in the coming days of South Summit. Thank you.